I think somebody hurt these kids. I think somebody hurt them.
Our heart don't lie, and my heart is telling me that my kid did not have nothing to do with this, and I had nothing to do with this.
I have children, I have grandchildren, and I see what kids are like through the woods. There's no reason for any child to wander deep into the woods. There's just not.
Down in my heart, I do believe Jack and Lilly are alive. It's not because of what people are saying. It's my heart tells me that they are alive.
My heart tells me these babies are gone. My heart tells me that.
2 children vanish without a trace in rural Nova Scotia. But behind the mystery, 2 grandmothers tell 2 very different stories. One points inside the home. The other insists the children were taken. Their voices don't just reveal grief. They expose a family divided, secrets untold, and suspicions that refuse to fade. In this video, we take you deep into their conflict. From Belinda Gray's haunting plea, to Janie McKenzie's long silence, to the explosive divide that still haunts this case. Every part of this story matters, and you won't want to miss a single moment. This is True Child Cases. Stay with us until the end, and don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss the truth behind the most haunting child cases. Part 1. Grandmother Breaks Silence. Belinda Gray's Fight for Lilly and Jack. The disappearance of 6-year-old Lilly Sullivan and her 4-year-old brother Jack has shaken Nova Scotia to its core. For months, the province has been caught in the grip of one haunting question. How did 2 young children vanish in broad daylight, without a trace? While investigators combed through forests, abandoned mine shafts, and rural roads, another voice began to rise above the silence. The voice of a grandmother who refused to stay quiet. That grandmother is Belinda Gray, the paternal grandmother of Lilly and Jack. Unlike others in the family who have kept their distance from the public eye, Belinda has become a relentless advocate, demanding answers and pointing the finger toward what she believes is the heart of the mystery. When she first arrived at the Lansdowne trailer to help search for her missing grandchildren, she was struck by disbelief. For 2 years, she had been cut out of their daily lives. After her son Cody separated from Malehia, contact with Lilly and Jack slowly dwindled. Daniel Martel, the children's stepfather, grew jealous and controlling, refusing to allow Malehia to bring the children to visit Belinda. As a result, she had no idea where her grandchildren had been living until that desperate May morning, when she pulled off Highway 289 and drove past orange cones marking the search zone. The moment she stepped inside, she was stunned. The trailer was cluttered, the yard filled with junk, and the kitchen chaotic. Wow, she remembered thinking. The neat and tidy image she had once associated with Malehia was nowhere to be found. It was then that a chilling realization struck her. Her grandchildren had been living in conditions she had never been allowed to see. That day, searchers spread across the thick woods of Lansdowne. Volunteers in bright orange vests pushed through brambles, tearing their ankles and pulling ticks from their skin. Helicopters scanned from above, while police dogs sniffed through the brush. And through it all, Belinda kept searching, unwilling to rest. She recalls being so determined that she considered sleeping in her car overnight, just to be there at first light. The thought of her grandchildren alone in the wilderness, or worse, pushed her beyond exhaustion. But alongside that determination came another thought, one that cut even deeper. When she learned that Malehia had left Lansdowne to stay with her mother, something clicked in Belinda's mind. If Malehia could leave, she thought, then maybe it meant she already knew her children weren't coming back. From that point on, Belinda Gray became one of the loudest voices demanding accountability. She called out Nova Scotia's Child Protection Services for failing to act on warning signs. She criticized the RCMP for their lack of transparency. And she began appearing on YouTube live streams, sharing her insights, her heartbreak, and her growing suspicion that the truth of what happened lay much closer to home than anyone wanted to admit. Her words carried weight. "I don't believe my grandchildren are alive," she told reporters. "But to not get answers, it's like No, there's answers out there. 2 kids don't just disappear in the morning and nobody knows nothing. To many, she became the emotional anchor of the case. A grandmother filled with grief, yes, but also with clarity. She pointed directly at the mobile home in Lansdowne as the center of the mystery. If they don't find answers outside that home, then the answers are inside that home, she declared. Behind her determination, however, lies a shadow of regret. Belinda has admitted that she wishes she had fought harder to see the children while they were alive. She remembers birthdays missed, visits denied, and the haunting realization that perhaps she might have noticed something was wrong if she had been given the chance. Looking back at photographs of Lilly and Jack, she noticed their thin frames, their dry, cracked lips. To her, they looked malnourished, worn down. "I hate to say it, but every one of us failed them," she admitted. "We all failed these kids." Still, Belinda remains undeterred. She continues to tend her sprawling garden in Middle Musquodoboit, a space that once echoed with the laughter of Jack crawling across her kitchen floor and Lilly parading in oversized glasses and garden hats. And in between pulling weeds and watering plants, she continues her fight for answers. She appears in online chat groups, live streams, and interviews, clinging to every breadcrumb of information that could lead to the truth. She carries not just her sorrow, but the weight of public expectation. Because in many ways, she has become the face of the search for Jack and Lilly. As the weeks turn into months, her voice grows only louder. Where others have chosen silence, Belinda has chosen to speak. And in doing so, she has drawn a line between 2 grandmothers, each with their own version of the truth. Hooked to part 2. But while Belinda Gray has made herself heard, the other grandmother, the woman who lived just steps away from the children, remained silent for more than 2 months. Who is Janie McKenzie, and why did she stay quiet? Part 2. The step-grandmother in the shadows, Janie McKenzie's hidden role. While Belinda Gray raised her voice and demanded answers, the other grandmother chose a different path: silence. For more than 2 months after Lilly and Jack vanished, Janie McKenzie, the mother of Daniel Martell and the step-grandmother of the children, remained in the background. She was not on television pleading for answers, not on live streams defending herself, and not giving interviews to the press. Instead, she stayed within the shadows of her property in Lansdowne, a woman who had lived only steps away from the children, but who now seemed hesitant to step into the storm. Janie was the owner of the trailer where Malehia, Daniel, and the children had been living. It was her land that became the epicenter of one of the largest searches in Nova Scotia's history. When the young family first moved in, she had offered them shelter in what she must have hoped would be a fresh start. But the reality inside the home quickly spiraled into chaos. The racket of the children, the constant noise, the clutter and stress became so overwhelming that Janie eventually retreated into her own camper parked in the driveway, leaving the trailer to her son, his partner, and the children. From then on, her contact with Lilly and Jack was limited to what she could hear through her window or across the yard. On the morning the children disappeared, Janie later told reporters she remembered hearing them playing in the backyard. She said their voices carried across the property, lively and full of energy as they always were. But she maintained that in all her years of knowing them, she had never once seen the children venture into the deep woods on their own. To her, the idea that they had simply wandered off was unthinkable. For Janie, the only explanation that made sense was that someone had taken them. Yet she did not step forward to make that claim in public. For weeks, the community and the wider country watched as Belinda Gray, the other grandmother, became the voice of the family. Belinda appeared everywhere, on live streams, in interviews, at search sites, while Janie remained silent. It was not until more than 2 months later that she finally broke that silence, first through a CBC interview and then through voice memos released in a public chat. To many observers, her long silence was puzzling, even suspicious. Why had she waited so long to speak? What held her back? When Janie finally did share her story, her stance was clear. She believed her grandchildren were still alive. She insisted they had been taken, not lost, and that the answer did not lie in the woods or the bogs of Pictou County. She had faith that one day they would be found. Her conviction stood in stark contrast to Belinda's heartbreaking admission that she believed Lilly and Jack were already gone. These two opposing views, the hope of one grandmother and the grim certainty of another, would become a defining tension in the public narrative. But Janie's silence had already planted seeds of doubt. In the eyes of many, waiting 2 months to speak up about what she believed happened made her words feel late, even defensive. She was, after all, Daniel's mother. Her loyalty was never in question, and her desire to protect him was natural. Yet that same loyalty led many to wonder, was her silence meant to shield herself, her son, or perhaps something more? Even in her public statements, Janie's words circled back to her son. She described him as a devoted stepfather who handled the children better than their mother could. She painted a picture of a man who was relied upon, who kept the children calm, who was the backbone of the household. To critics, it seemed less like a grandmother pleading for her missing grandchildren and more like a mother defending her own child. That distinction, subtle yet powerful, shaped how many interpreted her story. There was another layer as well. For a woman who had lived on that property, who had given her trailer to her son's family, who had slept in a camper just a few steps away from where the children vanished, her silence carried extra weight. If anyone outside Daniel and Malahia might have known the truth, many thought it was Janie. And so when she finally spoke, the question was not just what she said, but why she had waited so long to say it. Her belief that the children had been abducted became her anchor, her shield against the growing suspicions that swirled around the family. To her, the search in the woods was a futile effort. The children, she said, had never been the type to wander off. Her words reassured some who wanted to cling to hope, but to others, they only deepened the mystery. Because if she was right, and the children had been taken, then who had taken them? And why? Her late entry into the public conversation also drew attention to the division within the family. On one side was Belinda, pressing for answers inside the home and pointing to the dysfunction and secrecy of the household. On the other side was Janie, protecting her son and directing suspicion outward, toward the faceless idea of an abductor. It was not just two grandmothers with different opinions, it was two opposing truths, spoken from the same tragedy. For weeks, the silence of Janie McKenzie hung over the case like a shadow, and when she finally did speak, her words did little to bridge the divide. Instead, they highlighted it. In the eyes of the public, the case of Lilly and Jack was no longer only about two missing children. It was also about a fractured family, two matriarchs standing on opposite sides of the same wound, each certain that her version of the truth was the one that mattered. Hook to part 3. Two grandmothers, two truths, and one mystery that refuses to fade. As Belinda insists the answers lie inside the home, and Janie insists the children were taken away, the question becomes unavoidable. Who do you believe? Part 3. Two grandmothers, two stories. Who do you believe? Two grandmothers, two stories, two versions of truth that could not be more different. In the wake of Lilly and Jack Sullivan's disappearance, the public has been left staring at a family divided, each side led by a matriarch with her own conviction. On one side stands Belinda Gray, the paternal grandmother, her voice breaking but unwavering as she declares that her grandchildren are gone and that the answers lie inside the Lansdowne trailer. On the other side is Janie McKenzie, the step-grandmother who waited 2 months to speak, and when she did, insisted the children had been abducted and were still alive. The clash between them is not only personal, it has shaped how the world views the case. Belinda's words are searing in their clarity. "Two kids don't just disappear in the morning and nobody knows nothing," she told reporters. To her, the idea that strangers had swept into a remote hamlet at dawn, taking two children without leaving a single trace, was not just unlikely, it was impossible. She pointed instead to the mobile home, the chaotic household, the dysfunction she glimpsed too late. Every time she spoke publicly, she drove home the same message. If police do not find answers in the forests and bogs of Nova Scotia, then those answers must be hidden within the walls of that trailer. It was a conclusion born of instinct, grief, and a grandmother's nagging suspicion that what really happened to Lilly and Jack was not far from home. Janie, however, could not accept that. From the moment she broke her silence, she painted a very different picture. She described hearing the children's voices that morning, alive and well in the backyard. She insisted they never wandered into the woods, never strayed far on their own. To her, the only explanation was that someone had taken them. She clung to the belief that her grandchildren were still out there, somewhere, waiting to be found. For Janie, the story of Lilly and Jack was not one of tragedy, but of hope, however faint. And so, two truths emerged, parallel, incompatible, and impossible to reconcile. For the public following the case, the contrast was jarring. Here were two women, both grandmothers of the same children, both deeply invested in their fates, yet each offering a story that canceled out the other. Who should be believed? The grandmother who demanded answers from within, or the one who deflected suspicion outward? The divide became sharper as each woman's words echoed across social media. On live streams and in chat groups, Belinda's statements were picked apart, her sorrow held up as evidence of her honesty. Meanwhile, Janie's late entrance and her fierce defense of her son Daniel raised eyebrows. To skeptics, she was less a grieving grandmother and more a protective mother, guarding her child against suspicion. Her loyalty was understandable, but was it clouding her judgment? Even in the tone of their messages, the difference was stark. Belinda spoke with regret, admitting that she wished she had done more, that she had failed to push harder to see the children. She described their thin bodies in photographs, their cracked lips, and wondered if they had been neglected. Her words carried the weight of someone who had nothing to lose, someone whose only mission now was to uncover the truth, no matter how painful. Janie, by contrast, spoke with conviction, but also with a shield. Her words often circled back to Daniel, to his role in caring for the children, to his strength in managing them when Malehaya could not. It was as if her story about the missing children could not be told without also defending her son. This difference did not go unnoticed. In a case already plagued by secrecy, speculation, and silence, the fact that two grandmothers stood on opposite sides of the truth only deepened public suspicion. Each time Belinda declared that the answers were inside the home, Janie countered by insisting they were outside it. Each time Belinda admitted her fear that the children were gone, Janie reassured that they were alive. To the RCMP, sifting through more than 600 tips, the contrast must have been as frustrating as it was complicated. But beyond the police investigation, the divide raised a more profound question. What happens when truth itself fractures within a family? In the search for two missing children, whose voice carries more weight? The grandmother who demands accountability, or the one who demands loyalty? Both women loved Lilly and Jack in their own ways, but love alone does not bring clarity. Instead, it has created two competing narratives, leaving the public to wonder which, if either, reflects reality. The tension between these two grandmothers mirrors the wider divide surrounding the case. To some, Janie's story offers hope, a chance that the children are still alive and waiting to be rescued. To others, Belinda's story is sobering but more believable, grounded in the harsh reality of what might have happened inside that household. Caught between those extremes, the public is left suspended in uncertainty, tugged between hope and despair, loyalty and truth. As weeks turn to months, the question grows louder. Can both stories be wrong, or is one of them holding the key to what really happened? If Janie is right, the children may still be alive. If Belinda is right, the answers lie buried within the walls of that trailer, and perhaps within the silence of those who lived there. Either way, the divide between them has become as much a part of this case as the missing children themselves. Hook to Part 4. As searchers pressed through the woods and investigators drained septic tanks and mine shafts, the divide inside the family only grew sharper. Behind the tears and the interviews, the Sullivan case became not just a mystery about two missing children, but a battle between families, each grandmother pulling in opposite directions. Part 4, Behind the Tears, the Family Divide. As days turned into weeks, the disappearance of Lilly and Jack was no longer just a police investigation. It became a story of a family breaking apart under the weight of suspicion. In the dooryard of the Lansdowne trailer, tears mixed with accusations. Relatives who had once gathered to search together began to turn on one another. The fracture ran deepest between the two grandmothers. Belinda Gray, pushing for answers inside the home, and Janie McKenzie, shielding her son Daniel and insisting the children had been taken by someone else. Their opposing truths rippled through the entire family, widening a divide that may never be healed. On the ground, the search was relentless. Orange-vested volunteers moved through thick spruce forests. Helicopters roared overhead, and dogs strained at their leashes. Police drained septic tanks, probed abandoned mine shafts, and scoured culverts. Yet even as the physical search intensified, so too did the emotional battle within the family. Belinda, arriving each morning determined to find her grandchildren, began to embody the desperation of a grandmother who had already accepted the worst. She admitted, painfully, that she did not believe the children were alive, but she still needed answers, needed closure, needed to know what had happened. Her persistence contrasted sharply with Janie's silence in the early weeks. Neighbors whispered about why she had not come forward, why she had not joined the chorus of voices demanding an Amber Alert. And when she finally did speak, her words only highlighted the rift. She said she had heard the children that morning, alive in the backyard. She said they never went into the woods alone. To her, the answer was abduction. But her belief, rather than uniting the family, hardened the divide. It gave those who already distrusted Daniel another reason to question her motives. Was Janie clinging to hope, or was she deflecting suspicion away from her son? The family divide did not remain private for long. It spilled out into the community, into Facebook groups, into YouTube live streams where Belinda spoke candidly about her pain. Viewers watched as one grandmother laid bare her suspicions, while the other seemed guarded, measured, and late to appear. This contrast fed speculation. The online true crime community dissected every word, every photograph, every pause in an interview. And at the center of that storm were two women who loved the same children, but could no longer stand on the same side. The tension was not just emotional, it was generational. Belinda represented the children's paternal line, the Sullivan family that had been distanced and excluded from their lives for years. Janie represented the Martell side, protective of Daniel, the stepfather under increasing scrutiny. Each woman carried her family's legacy, and each seemed determined to defend it. The divide became a mirror of the larger narrative, one side demanding accountability, the other demanding loyalty. For Belinda, the divide was heartbreaking but necessary. She told reporters that if answers could not be found in the woods, they had to be inside the home. Her conviction placed her in direct opposition to Janie, whose words defended the integrity of the household and pointed suspicion outward. These opposing positions created a stalemate, two matriarchs locked in a battle of perception, each undermining the other's version of truth. For investigators, the family's inability to present a united front only added to the complexity of the case. Behind the tears, behind the interviews, behind the public statements, What remained was a family torn in two. The pain of losing Lilly and Jack should have brought them together. Instead, it exposed fractures that had been there all along. Resentments, jealousies, old wounds that never healed. Now those cracks had widened into a canyon, one that threatened to swallow whatever hope was left. And so, while searchers trudged through bogs and officers sifted through 600 tips, the family itself became a battlefield. Belinda standing in her garden in Middle Musquattaboit, vowing not to stop speaking. Janie tucked away in Lansdowne, finally breaking her silence only to defend her son. Each of them carried grief in her own way, but grief had become another weapon, another shield, another reason not to agree. In the end, the search for Lilly and Jack was never just about two missing children. It was also about two grandmothers whose truths collided and whose collision reshaped the public's understanding of the case. Hope and despair, silence and speech, loyalty and accountability. These were no longer abstract concepts. They were living, breathing divisions within a single family. Hooked to Part 5. And yet, amid the chaos and the fractured loyalties, one grandmother's words would echo louder than all the rest. Her final plea cut through the noise, a chilling reminder that answers must exist somewhere. If not in the woods, then within the walls of that home. Part 5. The Last Hope. A Grandmother's Plea. 3 months after Lilly and Jack vanished, the forests of Lansdowne had grown quiet. The helicopters were gone, the drones had been grounded, and the searchers in their orange vests no longer combed the bogs and thickets. What remained was silence, broken only by the voices of two grandmothers who could not agree on what had happened to the children. One believed they were gone, the other believed they were alive. And in that divide, the truth of what happened to Lilly and Jack Sullivan seemed to slip further away. For Belinda Gray, the silence was unbearable. She carried with her the image of her grandchildren crawling across her kitchen floor, dressing up in oversized glasses, playing in her garden. She carried the guilt of not pushing harder to see them, of missing birthdays, of being kept away. And now she carried the weight of knowing she may never see them again. Her words, though painful, were steady. "I don't believe my grandchildren are alive," she admitted. "But to not get answers, it's like, no, there's answers out there. Two kids don't just disappear in the morning and nobody knows nothing." For Janie McKenzie, hope remained the only shield she had. When she finally spoke, her conviction was firm. The children had been taken, not lost. She said she had heard them in the yard that morning. She said they never strayed into the woods on their own. To her, abduction was the only explanation, and with it came the fragile belief that Lilly and Jack were still out there, waiting to be found. But Janie's words, coming months late, left many unconvinced. Was her hope genuine, or was it a mother's instinct to protect her son, no matter what? The contrast between them could not have been sharper. Belinda, confronting the possibility of death and demanding answers inside the home. Janie, clinging to hope and pointing outward, away from the trailer, away from Daniel. Each spoke with certainty, yet their certainties contradicted one another. And caught between them was the public, left to wonder which grandmother's truth to believe. For investigators, the case was already one of the most complex in Nova Scotia's history. They had drained septic tanks, probed mine shafts, seized devices, and interrogated relatives. They had followed hundreds of tips, tested items for forensics, and even offered a $150,000 reward for information. And yet, months later, no confirmed trace of Lilly or Jack had been found. In that vacuum, the voices of the grandmothers became louder. Their words filled the silence left by the absence of answers. Their stories became the lens through which the public viewed the case. Belinda's voice, in particular, carried a chilling edge. She was not afraid to say what many whispered, that the answers might already be known by those inside the home. Her final plea was clear, almost accusatory. If they don't find answers outside that home, then the answers are inside that home. It was a statement that drew a line in the sand, placing suspicion squarely on the very place where Lilly and Jack were last seen. To Belinda, the truth was not hidden in the vast forests or abandoned mine shafts. It was hidden in silence, in secrets, in the contradictions of those closest to the children. Her words carried more than sorrow. They carried a challenge. She believed that if the truth did not emerge from outside, it would one day surface from within. It was a grandmother's final plea, sharpened by grief, regret, and determination. She admitted she had failed to see the signs. She admitted everyone had failed them: family, community, even child protection services. "I hate to say it," she confessed, "but every one of us failed them. We all failed these kids." In contrast, Janie's hope sounded softer, more fragile. She said she believed they were still alive, because to believe otherwise would be unbearable. She clung to the idea that one day the phone would ring, and someone would tell her the children had been found. But her hope also carried suspicion from others, who questioned whether it was hope at all, or simply denial. And so, the story of two missing children became the story of two grandmothers. Two women who loved the same children, but whose grief took them down different paths. One chose to speak out loudly, to confront the possibility of death and demand accountability. The other chose silence, then hope, defending her son and holding on to the belief that the children were out there somewhere. Between them lies the unanswered mystery of what really happened on that quiet morning in Lansdowne. The case of Lilly and Jack Sullivan remains unsolved, but the voices of their grandmothers echo on, shaping how the world remembers them. In the end, perhaps both women are right in their own way. Perhaps hope and despair are not opposites, but reflections of the same grief. Or perhaps only one of them holds the truth, and the other is clinging to a story that will never be proven. What is certain is this: two children cannot vanish without someone, somewhere, knowing what happened. And until that truth is revealed, the voices of the grandmothers, one pleading for answers, the other clinging to hope, will continue to haunt the silence of Nova Scotia. Two children vanished, and the truth is still missing with them. Until answers are revealed, their story will remain one of Nova Scotia's darkest mysteries. This is True Child Cases. Subscribe now so you never miss an update, and help us keep the fight for answers alive.